I thought I had prepared for every possible disaster on my wedding day, but nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that came from someone I trusted most. For months, I had poured every ounce of energy into planning the perfect day. Being an event planner meant there was no excuse for anything less. The venue on the Chicago River had been booked a year in advance. The florist was one I'd worked with for a decade, and every single detail, from the cocktail napkins to the lighting, was handpicked by me. My fiancé kept joking that the only thing left for him to do was show up in a suit and say, "I do." I laughed it off, because in truth, I wanted this day to be flawless. Among the closest friends I counted on was Rachel. We'd met in college, survived bad boyfriends, job changes, and even lived together for a short stint after graduation. She had been the loudest voice cheering when I got engaged. Naturally, she was part of the bridal party. She helped pick out dresses, came along for fittings, and insisted she'd be by my side on the big day no matter what. I never questioned her loyalty. But 3 days before the wedding, Rachel called me. Her voice was weak-strained, like someone who could barely sit up in bed. She said she'd been hit with some kind of flu and couldn't imagine getting on her feet for hours, let alone standing through a ceremony and reception. She sounded miserable, coughing between words, apologizing over and over. I told her not to worry, that her health mattered more than anything else. I even reassured her I'd handle the last-minute changes to seating and photos. The morning of the wedding, I didn't even think about her absence. There were bigger things on my mind: hair, makeup, family arriving, my own nerves. The day was stunning, almost cinematic, the kind of wedding other planners would envy. Guests kept telling me it was one of the smoothest, most beautiful events they'd ever attended. I believed it was perfect. That was, until the following morning, when I was scrolling through social media, still floating on the high of being newly married. A photo popped up that made my stomach twist. It was Rachel, smiling, cocktail in hand, surrounded by friends at a rooftop party. The timestamp was from the exact night she was supposed to be home sick while I was walking down the aisle. At first, I told myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe the picture was older, maybe someone tagged her wrong, or maybe she had forced herself out for a quick appearance. But as I scrolled, the posts stacked up. There she was, laughing in a group shot, dancing under string lights, clinking glasses at a table packed with people I didn't know. The rooftop wasn't some quiet dinner. It was a full-blown party. The captions weren't subtle either. "Best night ever. So glad we made it out. Nothing beats summer nights in Chicago." The photos kept coming, each one stabbing deeper. My chest felt tight, and I just stared at my phone, the wedding glow crashing into something bitter. I wanted to scream, but instead I sat there, numb. This wasn't just about her missing a seat at the table or ducking out of photos. It was about the lie. She'd looked me in the eye, claimed she was too sick to stand, and then went out to dance until dawn while I said my vows without her. The worst part wasn't even my own humiliation. It was imagining what other people must have thought. My friends, my family, everyone had seen her as one of my closest companions. Now, if they stumbled across her posts, what would they assume? That she didn't care? That our friendship was a joke? That I had somehow misjudged the person I trusted for years? I showed the pictures to my husband, trying to keep my voice steady. He frowned, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You don't need this on your mind right now. You're married, you're happy, don't let her ruin it." He meant well, but it wasn't that simple. When someone close betrays you like that, you can't just brush it off. It rewrites the whole story you've been telling yourself about the friendship. That night, lying in bed, I replayed every conversation Rachel and I had in the months leading up to the wedding. The excitement, the promises, the way she swore she'd be there. It all felt fake now, like she had been playing a part in some performance I never noticed. I wasn't angry yet. Anger came later. Right then, I just felt hollow, like someone had quietly cut a hole through the middle of a bond one thought was unbreakable. And still, part of me wanted to hear her side. I didn't call, not yet, but I knew I couldn't let it slide forever. 2 days later, Rachel texted me, just a casual, "Hope the wedding was amazing. Can't wait to see Pics." Like nothing had happened. My hand shook holding the phone. I stared at her words, the way she sprinkled exclamation points, like she was still the supportive friend she'd always pretended to be. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust myself not to explode. Instead, I waited. I scrolled back through her posts, each one even clearer now that I wasn't in shock. She wasn't in the background or caught off guard. She was front and center, smiling straight into the camera. The comments under her photos gushed about how great she looked, how fun the night was. Not one mention of being sick. It was obvious she hadn't been sick at all. She just didn't want to come. When I finally did reply, I kept it short. It was beautiful. Wish you could have been there. No emojis, no warmth. She sent back a heart. That was it. No explanation. No guilt, no attempt to explain the timing of her sudden recovery. But the silence between us wasn't going to hold forever. Our circle of friends started reaching out, sending congratulations, tagging me in photos. At brunch the following weekend, one of them leaned across the table and said, "Weird Rachel didn't come, huh? She looked fine at that rooftop thing." The words landed heavy, so it wasn't just me who noticed. People were connecting the dots. I brushed it off in the moment, saying something vague about her not feeling well, but inside, I was boiling. This wasn't just between her and me anymore. Others had seen the same betrayal. She hadn't just skipped out. She'd made me look like a fool in front of people who knew how close we were. That night, I sat down and drafted a message. I typed out everything I felt. The hurt, the disbelief, the fact that she had lied to me on the most important day of my life. I wrote paragraphs, deleted them, started over, then deleted again. No version felt strong enough without sounding like I was begging her to care. And that's what I realized. I didn't want to beg. Still, I couldn't move forward without some kind of confrontation. Whether she admitted it or not, Rachel had made her choice. The only question left was how I would respond. I finally decided to call her. Texts felt too easy for her to dodge, too safe for me to hide behind. When her voice came through, bright and chipper, it almost made me hang up. She sounded like someone who had no idea she'd done anything wrong. I didn't waste time. I asked straight out, "Why did you lie about being sick on my wedding day?" The line went quiet for a beat, then she laughed nervously. "Oh, come on, I didn't lie. I wasn't feeling great, but I rallied later. You know how it is." She said it like a shrug, like missing the single most important day of my life was no bigger deal than bailing on a brunch. My chest tightened. I told her I'd seen the photos, how she'd been out late, drinking, dancing, how she hadn't looked sick for a second. She sighed, her tone sliding into annoyance. "Look, I just couldn't deal with all the wedding stuff. It was overwhelming. I needed a break, but I didn't want to upset you, so I said I was sick. I thought it was kinder that way." Kinder, that word burned. I asked if she understood how humiliating it felt, how it made me look like an idiot when friends saw her out partying instead of standing beside me like she promised. She deflected, said people overreact, that it wasn't personal, but it was personal. She'd chosen a rooftop party over me. The more she spoke, the clearer it became. She wasn't sorry, not even close. She framed it like my expectations were the problem, like I was unreasonable for thinking a friend should show up for my wedding. By the end of the call, I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging. I was calm, almost icy. I told her we were done, that I couldn't trust her again. She laughed softly, said, "You'll get over it." But I didn't. I hung up, and something in me closed. That was the last time I heard her voice. After that call, I expected to feel lighter, like I had cut off a dead weight. Instead, the days that followed were strangely heavy. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her out of habit, only to remember there was nothing left to say. A decade of shared history doesn't vanish cleanly, even when the trust is gone. Our mutual friends noticed the shift almost immediately. At the next gathering, someone asked where Rachel was, and the room fell into a quiet that said everyone already knew the answer. I kept it simple. "We're not close anymore." No one pressed me for details, but I could see in their eyes that word about the wedding had already circulated. A few offered me small nods, as if to say they understood without needing the story spelled out. The hardest part wasn't explaining it to others. It was accepting it myself. She hadn't just skipped a party. She'd skipped one of the milestones people remember forever. I'd look at my wedding photos and feel the gap where she should have been. She wasn't there helping me into my dress. She wasn't laughing in the candid shots. She wasn't raising a glass during the toast. It was a hollow spot, a reminder of what I thought we had and how quickly it collapsed. But something else started to happen too. Without her constant commentary in my life, the noise quieted. Rachel had always been a strong presence, loud opinions, constant drama, the type who needed every conversation to orbit her. Once she was gone, there was more room, more peace. I noticed it at work, at home, even in the way I breathed walking down Michigan Avenue. That was when it hit me. Sometimes betrayal doesn't just take something away, it also clears space for something better. And though I wasn't ready to call it a blessing, I could feel the shift beginning. Weeks went by, and I threw myself back into work. Playing events had always been my escape, and now it became a kind of therapy. I loved the rush of putting together details, watching them come to life, and seeing clients beam when everything went right. It reminded me of why I cared so much about my own wedding day in the first place, because these moments mattered. Rachel, meanwhile, faded into the background. I didn't unfollow her on social media right away, but I stopped engaging. Her life still played out online. New bars, new groups of people, the same curated smiles. It was strange, though. I realized I wasn't jealous or angry anymore. I was detached, like I was watching a stranger. The version of her I'd known didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. One afternoon, I got coffee with Erin, another friend from our circle. She leaned in halfway through our lattes and said, "I have to tell you, people noticed how you handled everything with Rachel. You didn't drag her, you didn't make a scene. Honestly, it impressed a lot of us. I didn't know how to respond at first. I hadn't been trying to make a statement. I just didn't want to waste more energy on someone who didn't value me. But hearing Erin say that gave me a quiet sense of validation. It made me reflect on how I'd been trained by my job to handle chaos with poise. When an event went sideways, a late vendor, a spill, a storm, I never panicked. I adapted, solved it, move forward. Maybe that instinct had carried me through Rachel's betrayal too. She expected drama, tears, maybe even a fight that would keep her relevant in the story. Instead, I gave her nothing but silence and distance, and that silence was more powerful than anything I could have shouted. By the end of summer, my husband and I hosted a small dinner at our apartment. It wasn't a formal event, just a chance to unwind with friends and share photos from the honeymoon. Everyone gathered around the table, plates of pasta, and glasses of wine in front of them, laughter filling the room. For the first time in weeks, I felt like things were settling into a new rhythm, but Rachel's absence still hung there, unspoken. Halfway through the evening, one of the guys finally said what everyone was thinking. "So, is Rachel just out of the group now?" He said it lightly, but the room went quiet. I put my fork down and answered honestly, "She made her choice. I'm not holding her spot open." No bitterness, no long explanation, just the truth. People nodded, and the conversation moved on. Later that night, after the dishes were stacked and the last guest left, I thought about how different the group felt without her. Less tension, less of that constant need to center everything on her moods. It wasn't that anyone disliked her before, it was that she always demanded space in ways no one else did. Without her, things felt balanced. I hadn't realized how much weight she carried in our dynamic until she wasn't there anymore. The irony was, if she had just been honest, if she had told me she didn't want to come, or that weddings overwhelmed her, maybe I could have forgiven it. But the lie, that flimsy excuse about being sick, wasn't just a cover. It was a sign of how little she respected me. Once I saw it that way, there was no going back. I didn't miss her at that table. I didn't miss her commentary, her dramatics, or her presence in my life. What surprised me most was realizing I didn't even miss her friendship. What I missed was the idea of the friend I thought I had. As fall rolled in, life got busy again. Work picked up with corporate holiday parties, and I barely had time to breathe. But every now and then, I'd still hear about Rachel through the grapevine. A friend of a friend would mention running into her, or I'd see her tagged in someone's post. She always looked the same, dressed up, smiling wide, like she hadn't lost anything at all. One night, I bumped into her unexpectedly. I was leaving a client meeting downtown when I spotted her across the street outside a bar. For a second, instinct almost pushed me to wave. Then I remembered, and I kept walking. She noticed me though, called my name, jogged across in heels, acting like nothing had happened. "Hey, you look amazing," she said, like we were still college roommates catching up. I stood there, cold wind cutting between us, and just waited. I wanted to see if she'd bring it up, if she'd offer an apology, even a half-hearted one. But she didn't. She just talked about how busy she'd been, how she was planning a trip, how we really needed to hang out soon. I listened, but I didn't respond much. Eventually, I told her I had to go and walked off. Her smile faltered for a second, like she finally realized I wasn't playing along. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange relief. Seeing her in person confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to admit anything or take responsibility. And for the first time, I didn't need her to. The friendship had already ended. What I had now was clarity, and that felt better than any apology she could have offered. By winter, the distance between us wasn't something I had to maintain anymore. It was just there. We no longer shared friends' updates, inside jokes, or late-night calls. My life felt cleaner without the constant swirl of her drama, though sometimes I catch myself remembering small moments, like late-night pizza runs back in college, or the way we used to laugh until we cried. Those memories were bittersweet now, like pages from a book I'd already closed. Then came an unexpected test. A mutual friend got engaged and planned a small engagement party. I knew Rachel would be invited, and I debated whether to go. Part of me worried it would be awkward, that the tension might overshadow the night. But another part of me thought, why should I give up celebrating someone else's happiness because of her? So I RSVP'd yes. The night of the party, I walked in with my husband, ready for whatever might happen, and sure enough, Rachel was there. She glanced at me across the room, and for the first time, she didn't rush over. She didn't try to hug me or start a casual chat. She just looked, then turned back to her drink. That tiny gesture said more than any conversation could have. Our mutual friends seemed to sense the shit too. No one tried to push us together. No one made comments about working it out. Instead, people naturally gravitated toward me and my husband. It was like the group had quietly chosen where they stood. Later that night, while laughing with friends over cake, I realized something important. I wasn't carrying her betrayal anymore. It wasn't a wound. It wasn't even a weight. It was just over. And seeing her there, still orbiting the same patterns, only made me more certain I'd outgrown her. By the time we left the party, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt free. Months passed, and the whole thing settled into memory. My wedding day was still everything I wanted it to be, except for that one empty spot. But over time, even that stopped feeling like a hole and more like a reminder. Not every person you start with is meant to walk beside you through the milestone. Some friendships run their course, and that's okay. Rachel never reached out again. Not really. There were no apologies. No explanations, just silence. At first, they used to sting, but eventually I understood it for what it was. Her way of showing she had nothing left to give. And honestly, I was glad. It saved me from having to keep cutting ties. The thread had already snapped. There was no point trying to knot it back together. In her place, new connections grew. I found myself closer to people I'd once considered just acquaintances. With Rachel gone, space opened up for different energy. Friends who showed up, who didn't make everything about themselves, who celebrated without conditions. I hadn't realized how much room she took up until she wasn't there anymore. Looking back, what happened still shocks me sometimes. But more than anything, it taught me that loyalty isn't about words or promises. It's about action. On the biggest day of my life, Rachel chose not to stand by me. That decision spoke louder than anything she could ever say. And when I finally stopped trying to make sense of it, I felt something I hadn't expected at all. Peace. Clean, quiet peace. I had my husband, my marriage, my career, and friends who showed me every day that they were exactly where they wanted to be. Losing Rachel wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of hers and mine.